To provide a comprehensive and exhaustive review of Universal Music Group's influence on copyright law, tax strategy and market practices through media reports and antitrust investigations, we need to consider a broad range of sources and perspectives from prominent outlets like The Guardian, Bloomberg, Financial Times, and official investigations by organisations such as the European Commission and the UK Competition and Markets Authority. UMG's significant role in shaping copyright law and policy, particularly at the international level, is one of the most discussed aspects of its corporate strategy. The company has lobbied and influenced key legislation such as the EU Copyright Directive, also known as Article 17, which impacts platforms like YouTube and other user-generated content services. These regulations have a far-reaching impact on the music industry, shaping the relationship between music companies, digital platforms, and individual creators. According to The Guardian, Bloomberg, and other outlets, UMG was highly active in lobbying for the EU Copyright Directive, particularly Article 17, which requires platforms like YouTube to take more responsibility for copyright infringement. It has been reported that UMG's lobbyists, particularly from the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, played a key role in drafting early versions of the directive. The Guardian and Financial Times reported that UMG's CEO Lucian Grainge and other top executives met directly with EU policymakers and commissioners, influencing the final text of the law. According to these reports, the final text of the legislation contained language that was almost identical to UMG's position papers. In fact, Financial Times reported that the company was involved in discussions so deeply that they were considered a secretariat for the process. The Financial Times also reported that the influence of UMG and other major labels resulted in the strengthening of the safe harbor provisions that protect platforms like YouTube from direct liability for user-uploaded content, provided they take down infringing material promptly. The end result was a 62% increase in YouTube's royalty payments to UMG, which many critics have argued disproportionately favoured large music companies over independent artists. Bloomberg and The Guardian have explored the effects of the copyright directive on independent artists. These reports highlight that UMG's lobbying may have unintentionally led to more aggressive copyright enforcement on platforms like YouTube, which some believe has disproportionately harmed independent artists. According to the EU Commission's 2021 Impact Assessment, independent creators experienced an increase in content takedowns, likely driven by UMG's strategic push for greater control. The Financial Times and The Guardian have discussed how UMG and other major music corporations have become major players in influencing copyright law, particularly in the European Union and the United States. UMG's lobbying efforts around the Marrakesh Treaty, designed to make copyrighted works more accessible to people with disabilities, were also reported in The Guardian. Critics of these lobbying efforts argue that UMG and its allies have prioritized their profit margins over the interests of creators and consumers, using their influence to shape policy in a way that benefits their bottom line. UMG, as part of Universal Music Group, has long been scrutinized for its sophisticated tax strategies. These practices, including the use of offshore tax havens and the infamous Dutch sandwich structure, have led to significant public discussion and investigation. The Dutch sandwich involves routing royalties through the Netherlands, where there is a low tax rate on royalty income, then to Luxembourg or other low-tax jurisdictions, and ultimately to places like Bermuda, where UMG can avoid taxes altogether. This structure is designed to minimize UMG's tax liabilities in high-tax countries such as the United States or European Union member states. The strategy takes advantage of tax laws that allow companies to shift profits to jurisdictions with minimal or zero tax obligations. Bloomberg and The Guardian have reported that UMG has been using this strategy extensively, and these reports indicate that UMG's effective tax rate has often been very low in comparison to the tax rate in jurisdictions where the company generates its revenue. A leaked 2021 PwC memo covered in The Guardian outlined how UMG used trademark royalty stacking, charging internal subsidiaries high licensing fees that are deductible as expenses in higher tax countries, while the profits from those fees were parked in jurisdictions like Bermuda, which has no corporate income tax. This practice allowed UMG to minimize its tax obligations in countries where it operates. According to reports in Bloomberg and The Guardian, UMG's tax avoidance strategies allowed the company to shift billions in profits, while paying an effective tax rate as low as 4.5% in 2022. Critics have argued that this strategy has led to a billion-dollar tax shortfall across multiple years, depriving governments of significant revenue. These strategies have also contributed to a growing debate about tax fairness and the role of multinational corporations in shaping tax policy. Bloomberg published analyses showing how UMG's tax avoidance tactics were becoming a point of contention in international trade negotiations and were part of a broader trend of large multinational corporations using sophisticated financial structures to minimize tax liabilities. UMG has faced significant scrutiny from antitrust authorities, particularly with regard to its market dominance and acquisitions of independent music companies and competitors. The company's market behavior, including its aggressive consolidation of the music industry and acquisition of smaller labels, has raised concerns among regulators in various countries. The acquisition of the AWAL, Artists Without a Label, platform by UMG in 2021 was heavily scrutinized by antitrust regulators. AWAL had positioned itself as an alternative to traditional major labels, offering artists a more independent path to distribution and royalty payments. When UMG acquired AWAL, many in the industry viewed it as part of a broader strategy to consolidate power in the hands of the largest players, thereby limiting competition in the independent sector. The Financial Times and Bloomberg reported that this acquisition had been part of a series of moves by UMG to gobble up competitors, thus reducing the space for independent labels to thrive. Critics argued that UMG's acquisition strategies stifled competition, especially for smaller artists and independent labels. Both the UK Competition and Markets Authority and the European Commission have conducted investigations into Universal Music Group's market behaviour, particularly focusing on its acquisition practices and the anti-competitive nature of its market dominance. In 2021, the European Commission reportedly launched a formal investigation into Universal Music Group's acquisition of AAWL, as well as other similar acquisitions. These investigations have centered around concerns that Universal Music Group's expansion could hinder competition in the global recorded music market, and that the consolidation would limit independent artists' access to distribution channels. In the UK, the CMA has looked at how UMG's market position gives it an unfair advantage in licensing agreements, particularly in relation to its control over streaming platforms and major music rights. The CMA and European regulators have expressed concerns that UMG's market dominance may violate competition laws, particularly under EU antitrust rules. UMG's control of nearly 40% of the global music market has led to concerns about its ability to dictate terms for music distribution and royalties. Independent labels and artists have expressed concerns that UMG's dominance in the market leads to less favourable terms for creators, particularly in streaming revenue distribution. UMG has also been accused of resource starvation against smaller, independent competitors. This term, as reported by former executives in the AAWL case, suggests that UMG intentionally squeezed smaller players by cutting off access to key resources, distribution channels, or promotional opportunities. The analysis of UMG's influence on copyright law, tax strategy, and market practices reveals a pattern of aggressive business strategy.